Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of the View from the Clipper podcast. My name is James, and again, joined by Josh Sexton. Josh, how are you doing today?
Yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, it's a strange time really in Clipperland, isn't it? There's some sad departures which I know we're going to get into. There's some I guess exciting trades that we're also going to get into. But yeah, Clippers fallen into the play-in since we last recorded, so a lot to get our teeth into. It's been interesting times.
Yeah, I think it's been a bit of a whirlwind week in Los Angeles. I mean, we won't touch on the other half of LA, but there's been some serious trades that have been going around. I don't think there was a lot of expectation around the Clippers making any big moves just due to the lack of assets that they've had, but they have made some changes, and I think there were some needed changes. They needed a backup five. They needed some help from that second unit, and they have gone away and made some important moves. So we'll get into it. We'll run through the moves that they've made and we'll break them down trade by trade. There's also a sneaky addition that they've made on the buyout market, which we can touch on as well later on. But we can start with the first trade that the Clippers made. So they acquired Drew Eubanks and Patty Mills from the Utah Jazz for PJ Tucker, Mo Bamba, and a future second round pick. The Clippers desperately needed a backup five with just the lack of minutes that Mo Bamba has been getting. They needed someone to be able to service that spot. And getting Patty Mills, to be honest, is you know he's coming towards the end of his career. But I wanted to get your thoughts on this move. Obviously, they've given up PJ Tucker, the man who we never thought would see the back of. He just hasn't been with the team at all this season. And also Mo Bamba, who joined in free agency, someone that's had minutes here and there, but just hasn't really taken that leap that many hoped that he would make. So, Josh, what are your thoughts on this move by the Clippers?
Yeah, I think it was the PJ Tucker contract that we thought might outlast an apocalypse. To be honest, it felt like there was we were never going to be able to get off that contract. And interesting that there's been a couple of moves made since where you maybe feel like the Clippers could have got more value, but PJ was clearly intent on tanking his value. Really, had no intent to stay in LA, and that's basically been the case since probably midway through last season, maybe a bit closer towards the back end of last season. So no, pleased that the Clippers feel like they've got something, serviceable in return in terms of Drew Eubanks. Like you say, the Mo Bamba experience didn't really work. Like there was promising signs at first. I was actually in LA for those first couple of games of Mo Bamba, and I liked what I
Of
saw
course.
from him. Like there was some, shot blocking potential there. I think it was all the hallmarks of what Mo Bamba was, I guess, was tipped for quite hotly when he came into the NBA. Why he was drafted, why Shaq Wes was making songs about him. I guess was that shot blocking potential, his ability to shoot the three ball too. It seemed like he could make some level of impact there, and you hope that the Clippers would go and get something that's a bit more, I guess, closer to what they're looking for from Ivica Zubats. In the meantime, that's not been the case. It turned out that Tyler Lue didn't even really fancy Mo Bamba as not only backup five, but really Nicholas Batum had completely dislodged him as a sort of small ball five
Yeah.
from the rotation altogether. So not a great surprise to see him used as trade bait in the end. And then they go and get Drew Eubanks, who I don't think is necessarily loads better than Mo Bamba. It feels like a similar type of player who they're just taking a low risk to medium reward really banker on. So we'll see what we get from Drew Eubanks. I can't say I was massively impressed with his first minutes from the Utah game the other night, but then I wasn't impressed with much of what the Clippers did, which maybe we'll come on to towards the end if we have time once we've dug more into the trades. But no, happy for the Clippers to get off the PJ Tucker contract. Happy to see Patty Mills as well. To be honest, he's a player who I've always admired. He's a bit of a clipper killer, isn't he? He's one of them who feels like he's in
Mm.
the I guess what you could call the Mike Conley Hall of Fame of guys who just seem to
He
cook
is,
the
isn't he?
Clippers
Yeah.
every time we come up against them. So, he's got a relationship with Kawhi, got a relationship with Nico Batum.
Mm.
Um, and then, possibly Ben Simmons coming in as well. And I think there's one of the guy that I'm probably missing in there. So,
Yeah.
it feels like Patty is just one of those good vibes, end of bench guys to have. I think Law Murray did a tweet where he sort of I put it in our Clippers UK group chat saying it helped my brain because it was almost like the attributes that the Clippers had lost in trades and then they'd replaced in trades and Patty Mills was comfortably the end of the bench vibes guy. So happy for him to be that. And yeah, like not the most standout of all trades, especially on the day that it came, because
Mhm.
as you sort of highlight before, it came on the same day as that. I mean, whatever you'd call it, Luka Doncic to the Lakers trade, and just the Lakers managing to fail upwards again. This will just be, a forever story, unfortunately, one that it feels like uh, just once again, like directly dunks on us as Clippers fans, because now the Lakers are the sixth seed, and we're in the play-in, but and they obviously blew us out in that game, which I think was probably the game where we fell into the play-in as well. So yeah, disappointing really, but what can you do? That's for them to work out and figure out. And meanwhile, we made the big headline trade of the day in bringing in Drew Eubanks.
Yeah, like I said, it's no headline trade. I mean, I don't think any trade ever can, to be honest, compete with that move. It absolutely came out of nowhere. I remember I woke up the morning that it happened and just sort of had to double, even triple read it. I just didn't believe that it was real. But obviously, we're not a Lakers podcast. Obviously, that's a move that they've made. Fair enough. We've got Drew Eubanks, Patty Mills. Like
Yeah,
that's just the way things the
we're
way
the real
things are.
winners.
But exactly. Yeah, like the Clippers needed a backup five. Like I said, it wasn't like a big move, big splash. They just needed someone who could come in, be competent. And Drew's exactly that. He can run the floor. Interestingly, I saw a stat that he can actually shoot at three. I think all time he shot 40% from three, but it's incredibly low volume. And
Yeah.
it's just one of those things that you bring a new player in and you're like, oh, he's actually quite good at this sort of part of his game, but actually doesn't really show it. So I don't expect Drew Eubanks at his age to all of a sudden start shooting threes for the Clippers. But I think it's interesting, and let's see how that develops. But unfortunately, actually got injured against the Jazz, and I don't know if there's actually a timeline on that. But I
No.
think that's very Clippers to bring in make a trade for a backup five, and he gets injured against a team that you went and got him from. But
Yeah, just as we're all sort of like banging our head against a brick wall with Nico Batum in recent games as well, which I think is probably more indicative of like a team wide malaise and fatigue right now. But Eubanks was brought in, I guess, because he had more similar attributes to Zubac than someone like Mo Bamba
yeah,
did. And then like you say, it's very Clippers curse coded for him to immediately get injured, especially against his old team as well.
yeah, and I think with Patty Mills, I mean, yeah, like that's a name that I mean we've both been following NBA for a long time. He's a name's always been like a solid role player, but at 36 years old, I mean, I haven't seen much of him for the Clippers. I think he's played a handful of minutes here and there, but I really don't think that's someone who's going to be in and around the rotation. Remains to be seen based on injuries, etc. But with some of the other acquisitions that we can get into after this, I don't think there's much of a route for Patty Mills. But I think it's just about having that veteran player in the locker room, and you'll see with a lot of these trades. I think the main theme through them is that it gives the Clippers so much flexibility, and they already had flexibility moving into the next couple of off seasons. But I think the rumors have been out there. They're targeting free agency 2026 with some big names that are still looking to become available. They've got some incredible flexibility in the cap space coming up. I think it's something around 70 million or something. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe at least I think Mills and Eubanks should be. They've got contracts that are coming to a close in 2025. I think I
Yeah.
don't know if there's any options in there, but this is money that the Clippers can get off quite easily. Obviously, PJ Tucker was someone that I think was already, his contract was coming to an end, but he wasn't getting used for the Clippers. So I think it's a big win to be able to turn PJ's contract into Eubanks, someone who can service you in different moments and plug that gap. And like I said,
And
someone
I
who's
think
very similar to Zubac as well.
I was going to say, I think it's a trade exception as well, so that helps with
Mm-hmm.
some sort of, I guess especially in these buyouts, it helps because we could basically swallow somebody into that, which we'll maybe come to talk about some options on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a win for the Clippers. Gives them some much needed depth, but I think probably the biggest swing trade out of all of them. was the acquisition of Bogdanovic from the Hawks. He's a player that I think has been sort of undervalued by many in the league, but he's been quite a consistent player other than this season. I mean, looking at his stats, going back through his days in Atlanta, but also the Sacramento Kings, this is a player who's been, I think, quite similar to Norman Powell, maybe just sort of Norman Powell light, in that he's been in six man of the year conversations, but hasn't really like taken that jump to like an all-star level. But it's someone who can average, around 15, 16 points a game. But this season, he's had a little bit of a lull, which I think is why the Clippers have been able to acquire him. And it remains to be seen with his health. I think he's had a few health issues over the last few seasons, and this season has been averaging 10 points a game, whereas previous season he was averaging 16.9. 3-point percentage has gone down. It's way below career average, but this is a guy that the Clippers can add to their second unit and just absolutely bolster that and have a ball handler there that is competent. Again, health issues and his consistency this season, there's definitely question marks around that, but I'm interested to see him in Clippers uniform. Before we obviously touch on the sadder side of the trade, what are your thoughts on the Clippers acquiring Bogdan Bogdanovic, or Bogey as he likes to be referred to?
Yeah, well, once again, like you say, it feels like one of those trades that's been made with that idea of flexibility in mind. But I was reassured, hearing Lawrence Frank talk about Bogdanovic in his press conference the other day. Now, Lawrence is the one ultimately making these trades, so you do expect him to talk up these players. But even hearing Bogdanovic himself speak about, the three-level scorer that he is, the shot creator that he is, because I think that's the thing that was definitely missing from the Clippers second unit. Really, I know we're going to come on to talk about Kevin Porter Jr., but we've both been I guess tired of the Kevin Porter Jr. narrative from the beginning. But one of the things that Kevin Porter Jr. lacked was any real consistency in terms of shot creation. So I guess the one thing that worries you in that sense is that, like you say, Bogdanovic is having a little bit of a down year shooting wise, but Lawrence Frank came out and said that they've looked into some of the advanced metrics around that, and they're pretty convinced that it's basically just the result of bad luck and just a sort of an outlier shooting year. So hopefully the Clippers can rehab him to an extent, because like you say, he's probably someone who has started flying a little bit under the radar from only a couple of years ago. I think it was only as recent as last season that he was being considered at least in six-man conversations. Whether he was actually at the top end of that award when by the time all the shouting was done is another thing, but he was looked at as one of those premier bench guys in what was a good Hawks team, really, or at least a passable Hawks team. So yeah, excited by that acquisition in so much as you can be when you can tell that one of the key things behind it is that financial flexibility, because as you say, quite a lot of these trades feel like they are heading that way, and looking at that, I was going on to look at the payroll there to see how much the sort of the money the Clippers can get off it in those years is, and you referenced the free agency class that's coming in 2026, and I've been quite hot on I don't even want to call it conspiracy theories really, but on the theory that maybe we'll see a grand return for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in 2026, because it feels like maybe the next step for Shai, especially whether he wins a championship or not in OKC, really is to go to a big market team, and the Clippers represent that, and they represent an attractive one with the new arena and all those things. So if Bogdanovic can be just passable in the meantime and keep the Clippers being a fun, overperforming team that we don't really expect to go on to be championship contenders, hopefully that's a sort of second round of a playoffs is something I'd probably bite your hand off right now for. So if he can contribute towards that, then I think we'd all be pleasantly surprised. But as you say, that the bigger picture is that 2026 free agency, and if it is a grand return for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, then we'll say that whatever happened at this trade deadline was worth it ultimately.
Yeah, I think Lawrence Frank at the front office, you can just tell with the moves they're making that they're really targeting that to shed as much salary off as possible.
Yeah.
Even with the unfortunate sort of make weight of this deal, yeah, you can sort of tell they're just looking to shed as much salary as possible and trying to almost match the quality that they can get. And I think one of the other ways in which I see it is obviously Norman Powell and his move into the starting lineup. Previously, the Clippers have had that sort of firepower offensively within the second unit, and I mean, Kevin Porter Jr. is obviously someone who's been on part of that second unit. Amir Coffey as like a six man, just haven't really got the consistency out of them, and I really see Bogey as someone that can offer that. If we can get him back to, his previous performances, really see those similarities with Norman Powell and his efficiency on the ball. Obviously, like we've been saying, it's not been there this season, but this is a veteran who's only 32 years old, but is a 3-point shooter who can hit shots off the catch, off the dribble. He can handle the ball, and that's something that we really needed in that second unit, and we just really haven't had that type of player to almost lead it at that time. So I'm hoping that he can come in and really be effective from the bounce. And like I mentioned, this is a veteran who's been around the league. Has got abundance of experience, and like you touched on with the contract situation, is just a real asset for the Clippers with the value he poses on the court, but also the flexibility he gives them leading up to that really important offseason in 2026 with, like I said, big names like SGA potentially on the market. If OKC don't manage to get that title in the next season or two, could definitely become an option. I'm trying to remind myself who else was available. I'm pretty sure Giannis was as well, and obviously that would be like quite a big coup if the Clippers can pull someone like that to Los Angeles. So there's some really big names that they can target with this trade, but unfortunately, as I mentioned, the Clippers have had to part with Terance Mann, who's obviously been like, at least in my time supporting the Clippers, I think one of like the most cherished fan favorite players. I think this season has obviously been rough for Terance, but he's been a franchise player through the 2-1-3 era. He was drafted at the very start with the 48th pick in the 2019 draft. And I think it's also, I think, a testament to him and the team that he's probably been the only real draft success of the 2-1-3 era, which is probably why we cherish him more, because he's someone that's really come through with a team. We've seen his development in real time, whether it was the Game 6 performance against the Jazz in 2021, or any of the previous successes, and he's built himself into a really solid role player. He's just unfortunately found himself in the position this season where the Clippers have obviously gone down this road away from Paul George and looked to sort of build out the team, and I think they've just got stronger profiles, and he just hasn't hit that heights that he previously has, and of course he's really like in his prime now. So I don't think they've been able to get the perfect assets that potentially were offered. There was a point in time he was sort of kept out of the James Harden trade. Probably wouldn't happen today, so didn't necessarily manage to sell high on Terance Mann, but I'm really, really thankful to his time. How did you feel when you saw Terance was in this trade and sort of seeing him leave the Clippers after, six really good years with the team?
Yeah, just sad, like sort of echoing your sentiments, really. Terance Mann from the minute he was drafted felt very LA Clippers. And what I mean by that is he came in as a second round pick. He was someone who wasn't expected to, really tear up any trees. And at a time when, as you mentioned, because it is the 2-1-3 era, stars disappointed in their own ways. Paul George never really fulfilling his potential, but, being at his best during that 2021 playoff run when Terance Mann was basically the glue that was holding everything together for the Clippers at the time, and especially in that Game 6, like you say, that will go down as probably one of the best playoff performances I've seen anyone have in an LA Clippers shirt.
Yeah.
Still to this day. So that will be a thing that we always cherish, and just that sort of having that underdog spirit, really, which I felt like the team that embodied that the most was the one that was led by Lou Williams, Patrick Beverley, and Montrezl Harrell, and it felt like it was really Lou Williams and Patrick Beverley who took Terance Mann under their wing, and Terance has spoke about that a lot down the years, the influence that those guys had on him, and how much he wanted to become a cultural architect as well, because those two were definitely that for the Clippers. So he did just feel like one of those guys, like him and Zubac are two of the longest tenured Clippers. Obviously, Zu being there for a little bit longer, but both of them feel like, key pieces in that culture at a time when, the 2-1-3 and just the Clippers' constant pursuit of the next star and the next star made it almost feel like there wasn't really a culture to have, at least not in terms of the top end talent of the Clippers. Now, guys like, James Harden
Hmm.
has really settled into that now. Russell Westbrook had a good go at sort of instilling his own one that at times just felt like it was almost built off the sort of strength and also adversity that Russell Westbrook brought to the team. It was a very strange sort of concoction, but you could tell Terance took a lot from Russ as well in terms of the good
Hmm.
points. So yeah, sad to see the back of Terance and his family. Really, it felt like they were always a credit to the Clippers organization, and it's sad that they'll no longer be around. But very happy for him to get a move to what I think is a great franchise like Atlanta, and another one in the NBA that sort of is probably a dying breed and that's similar to the Clippers. I would argue at least it feels like it has that kind of more family feel around it, and definitely more of like a working class basketball team feel around it because listen, I understand that the Clippers again, like the culture has changed a lot down the years because they've been, bringing in stars and been in real win now mode, and maybe that's made them seem a little bit more Hollywood. But for me, like the Clippers are built on this idea of grittiness. It's built on guys like Darius Miles and Quentin Richardson and Corey Maggette, and that sort of Rockler familiar LA Clippers team from back in the early 2000s to transition into as I say, the days of the Montrezl Harrell, Lou Williams, Patrick Beverley, and that was one of the things that I felt like Terance Mann was propping up and doing a real good job in propping up as one of the cultural architects. So yeah, sad to see Terance go and understand that. It's the business of basketball. It's the thing that all the players have said when they've come out in recent days to talk about Terance, haven't they? But you can even see in the words that they've all shared, from James Harden to Kawhi to Ivica Zubac, that Terance was such a popular guy in that locker room. So I'm sure he'll be missed from within the organization as well. So yeah, a sad one to see him go, but wishing him all the best for the future and hope that he can find that less sort of utility man role really, and find something that, like you say, is a bit more specific profile and something that plays to his strengths a bit more, because it felt like the uncertainty around his role, as much as it was great for us as Clippers fans to almost have a Swiss Army knife of a player, was probably the undoing for him in the end, because it felt all a
Yeah.
little bit jack of all trades and master of none. And I mean that with absolutely no disrespect towards Terance, because I
No.
think he was so much better than that. But that's ultimately because of how good he was in so many areas. That was sort of the box that he ended up falling into for the Clippers, where I think he's played 1 through 5 during his time with the Clippers, and certainly guarded 1 through 5 as well. So yeah, we'll wish Terance the best, like you said before, and hope he sees much more success than he has had this season, in particular with the Atlanta Hawks.
Yeah, absolutely. Wishing him all the best for the future. And I think he leaves with like a really strong legacy in LA, like you mentioned, with like Pat Bev and Lou Will taking him under their wing. He sort of really took that on board and just made the moments count. And ultimately, I think a lot of legacy and the players' success, it's obviously not about individual accolades. Obviously, Lou will and others might have obviously six man of the year awards, etc. But the moments that he gave Clipper fans, whether it be the Game 6 performance against the Jazz, and sort of ultimately being like one of the main reasons why the Clippers got to their first ever Western Conference Finals, like just how much that meant to the fans, and that just insane performance against Rudy Gobert. And I think he always just kept that attitude, even if things weren't going right for him. This is a guy who's worked incredibly hard to get where he has, and I think that has shown through in not just that Game 6 performance. I think often people forget like Terance has had an impact on so many Clipper games beyond just that performance. And I think there are a lot of comebacks that you can almost attribute with a lot of Terance Mann's performances, and just his gritness, his toughness, and willingness to sacrifice for the team, even in that game, sort of playing the small ball and just being fearless. Like he's just been an outstanding player to watch develop, and I think along the way, I think like you've touched on, he sort of probably reached that like developmental cap with the Clippers, where just was seen at that as that sort of jack of all trades but sort of master of none, where ultimately players like him sort of need that rhythm to develop, and really he was sort of relying on that offensive game to develop further, to sort of take into the next level. And I don't think he ever really got that. I think there was a couple of seasons ago I was reporting on one of his interviews. I think he was doing with Paul George, where he was saying, he's studying Jimmy Butler and his moves around the rim, and you're thinking, okay, like this is the season where Terance needs to step it to the next level, and he just never really got there, and he's sort of maintained that sort of catch and shoot guy who can defend all positions, which is extremely valuable. And I think he's going to be excellent for the Hawks under sort of the guidance of Trae Young. Yeah, even thinking back to the Dallas series of recent memory, like I think he was a phenomenal player in that series, and he's obviously relished those matchups with Luka, which unfortunately for him, obviously now they're sharing a locker room, or obviously sharing a city. I say sharing a locker room, obviously not in the same arena anymore, but they're close by. Obviously, he's quite quickly ditched the city, which is
Yeah.
obviously unfortunate because Luka's obviously been his main rival up to then. But yeah, shout out Terance Mann. I mean, I'll always have like the most fond memory, and it's not even Game 6 performance. My first ever NBA game that I got to see live was on a trip to New York, where I went to Brooklyn, see the Nets play the Clippers on New Year's Day 2022, and it was we had sort of COVID period of the NBA where all the teams were just decimated with either injuries or COVID protocol. And I think the Clippers starting five that day was Terance Mann, Amir Coffey, Serge Ibaka, Eric Bledsoe, and Reggie Jackson. And that team managed to beat the Brooklyn Nets, who had Kevin Durant and James Harden. It was another big comeback win that was inspired by a lot of big shots that Terance Mann had that day. He had 19 points, 3 threes, and I remember I was sat right behind the rim, and he hit that big shot, which others can go watch after this, just to sort of have that little bit of nostalgia of Terance Mann. But that just used to be his sort of trademark play, was just hitting these big threes in the corner, and just watching him do it in person and sort of witnessing him sort of just galvanize the team with these big moments obviously led to the win that day, which was completely against the odds, because
Yeah.
I've got the box score in front of me, and I'm looking at the bench, and Xavier Moon, obviously a player that the Clippers have had to rely on a few occasions over the previous seasons. Justice Winslow, Keon Johnson, James Ennis the third, Wendy Gabriel. Like, this team just did not have any real NBA star power. Like, none of these players I'm reading now are in making significant rotations in the NBA outside of maybe Amir Coffey for the Clippers right now. So yeah, it was sensational. And I think probably the biggest part of that day was Terance Mann, where I was sat right behind the hoop. The Clippers players were coming in and out of the sort of exit just to the left of me, and managed to get his headband that day, and I managed to get it framed. I've actually got it to the side of me here, so we'll show you. But I managed to get it framed, and that's the headband
Class.
from that performance. I'll cherish that forever. And I was very sad when he did decide that obviously the Clippers decided to move on for him. But yeah, I think myself, yourself, others have just so many memories of watching Terance, and he was easily a fan favorite. So very sad to see him go. And I mean, I guess similar to Terance, another player that the Clippers have lost in this deal was obviously Bones Hyland. I don't think there was much sentimental loss, obviously, compared to Terance leaving the Clippers, but Bones is someone who's been with the Clippers for a few seasons now, and I think very similar in the fact that we've had high hopes for him as well, but just never really seemed to pan out. I remember when the Clippers acquired him, he was sort of a player I always kept my eye on. I think he was fresh coming off a good playoff series with Denver, but just sort of fell out their rotation, and just hasn't really had a good string of games with the Clippers to build that rhythm and develop further. And I think there's another player who's sort of fallen out of favour just due to the moves the Clippers have made around the team, with obviously players joining, guys like James Harden, etc. And it just hasn't had that fair opportunity. And I think is similar to PJ Tucker, in someone that has been rumoured to be sort of leaving the Clippers for a while. He has recently been sort of released by the Hawks. I hope he finds a team where he can build that up again, because I do think there's a definite player in there that, like, Bones was someone who can just really turn it on at any occasion. He's got great 3-point shooting ability, playmaking. I think it's just his overall athleticism and size that potentially lets him down. And obviously, he's not someone who is particularly effective on the defensive end. But have you got any sort of exit thoughts on Bones Hyland leaving the Clippers in this deal?
No, again, just similar to what you said there earlier. It was a player that I did have high hopes for, and I guess the where I compare him the most to Terance Mann is like I said before, in that sort of almost that working class spirit of the LA Clippers. Like Bones felt like I think I've said it on one of these podcasts before. He's almost like street hooper levels of like raw ability, wasn't he? He was so exciting to watch when he was at his best, but unfortunately we didn't get to see that particularly often, and there was clearly some sort of I don't know if you want to call it like a rift with Tyler, because I don't imagine it's anything, personal between the two of them
Mm-hmm.
really. But clearly Bones has got a personality which rubs, has now rubbed two elite coaches in Michael Malone and Tyler up the wrong way enough for him to, find himself out of the rotation. There's clearly some defensive IQ, I think, probably lacking there, because I don't think it's for the want of trying with Bones. I think he displays, energy on the defensive end, but I think it's probably a couple of shot selection issues and again things pertaining to his IQ even on the offensive end, where I think he is a strong basketball player, and if he is to have a career in the NBA beyond this, it'll be because that offense has got a lot of potential for him to unlock there. So sad to see the back of Bones, just in terms of it being a almost another failed experiment for the Clippers, really, where the Clippers have become a nice rehab center for players whose NBA careers feel on the verge. It's not quite worked out with Bones. Wish him all the
Mm-hmm.
best at wherever he does land, and hope he can, find his way back into, meaningful NBA rotation minutes. But clearly, a few things for him to, clean up before he does do that. So yeah, wishing Bones all the best, but he's, as you say, he ends up being a little bit of a footnote on the headline of the trade for the Clippers, which is the sadness and seeing the back of Terance Mann.
Yeah, no, of course. And yeah, like you mentioned, wishing Bones the best for the future. I think there's almost like a third angle of this trade, which is the sort of flexibility which we've touched on.
Yeah,
Bones Hyland, obviously, that's not a meaningful contract, to be honest, but the Clippers recently obviously gave Terance Mann that 3-year, $47 million extension. So that's like a significant cut of the long-term commitment financially. Obviously gives them that flexibility over the next 3 seasons, putting in someone like Bogdanovic, who obviously, like we mentioned, Terance Mann's been out of rotation this season. Bogdanovic, someone that can come in and add value immediately, and is a profile that they need. But obviously moving on into coming off seasons, they're going to have that flexibility now that they've got that big contract off the payroll. And I think there was a point in which I remember quite clearly the Clippers giving Terance Mann that contract, and a lot of people looked at it like, wow, that's like quite a significant investment in him. And obviously it hasn't really paid off over the last season in particular. But yeah, wishing him obviously all the best with his move over to Atlanta. The Clippers also acquired 3 second round picks in this deal, and
yeah,
actually got back their own from 2027. So again, like, just adding to those assets that the Clippers are trying to build up moving forward. They've not been a team who've obviously had a lot of draft capital over sort of the long term. So getting in those second round picks is going to give them that extra bit of flexibility when it comes to deals that they may need to make if they are to attract another big star to Los Angeles in the coming future. But the final trade that the Clippers made over the last week was trading Kevin Porter Jr. to the Milwaukee Bucks for Marjon Beauchamp. Marjon is a player who was drafted 2022 in the first round, 24th pick. He's not a player I know I'd say too much about. I've been
no,
following too closely. But obviously, being a recent first round pick, he's had some meaningful seasons with the Bucks so far, but just hasn't really had that impact that they may have hoped for. Obviously, being a sort of late first round pick. He's still only 24 years old. we can see how he develops with the Clippers. But what are your thoughts on this trade, and obviously seeing the back of Kevin Porter Jr., who I know has obviously been was sort of a controversial addition for the Clippers and didn't really offset that with his performances.
No, I think to quote Brian Seaman, I would say the band sings hallelujah at seeing the back of Kevin Porter Jr. And that's as much for the fact there's an ongoing investigation going on into the allegations of domestic abuse against his ex-girlfriend, who of course is was an active WNBA player. I don't think she's on a roster at the moment, but Kurza Gondrezick was previously on the Chicago Sky, I think. So to get off another problem personality, and really like this is where I think the Clippers have cleaned up the most almost. There's two guys they've got rid of before this trade deadline in PJ Tucker and Bones Hyland, who've been away from the team in the past 12 months or so for I guess you call it unprofessional behavior, or at least not wanting to be part of rotations and making noises and moves towards showing disgruntlement towards that. So the Clippers being able to get off those two guys and as I say, have a bit of a refresher of those personalities in the dressing room, but then to get off a guy who is still under investigation seemed, relatively popular within the team, Ken Porter Jr. There's definitely been some, sound bites and things. His Joker costume at Halloween where he comes on with the green hair and stuff was, a sign as much that there was clearly some personality in the dressing room there. I don't care to get into that or assess that too much really because of the off the court stuff is a little bit insurmountable for me. While he's not really had too much of a punishment, he still got paid to play basketball in Greece for an extra year and then was straight back onto an NBA roster. And unfortunately, it was an NBA roster of the team that we both support and the team that we're here talking about today. So I don't know a ton about Marjon Beauchamp, but just really glad to get off the Kevin Porter Jr. thing. I feel like the replacement for him really is Bogdan Bogdanovic, and Terance Mann has ultimately been replaced in the rotation by Amir Coffey this season, who is sort of bringing that all round two-way shooting threes, defending well and defending 1 through 5, or at least showing enough length to be able to do that. Amir Coffey this season is fulfilling that Terance Mann glue guy role. If Bogdan Bogdanovic can be more consistent shot creator than Kevin Porter Jr. was. I sort of referenced this in passing before, but it was the thing that definitely made me bang my head against the wall the most with Kevin Porter Jr. is the shot selection which Tyler has come out in the past. It was a press conference I actually attended in during my time in LA, where he basically said that it was the tough shots that Kevin Porter Jr. takes while he was the Clippers were winning lots of games around that time, but Kevin Porter Jr. wasn't performing well for the Clippers, and the tough shots that he takes are ultimately that's what's in his wheelhouse. But I don't understand how that can really be true because they're just low percentage looks, and that was ultimately where it felt like there was just wild inconsistency in Kevin Porter Jr.'s offensive game. There'd be nights where it would feel like he'd put up 2 points and miss on really high efficiency. I think there was that stat that was going around for a time at the start of his Clippers career, wasn't there, where he was among the highest usage and worst efficiency of anybody in the NBA, and that it felt like it was because of those shots he was taking. He wasn't a high volume 3-point shooter. The shots he was taking were mostly mid range faders and off the dribble, elbow shots and things like that. So. If we can get more high percentage looks from Bogdan Bogdanovic, then I believe the Clippers have upgraded in that position. And I think I've probably done well so far to again analyze Kevin Porter Jr. in a basketball way, when really the main reason I'm glad to get him off our books at least is that there may still be a punishment to come for him. I hope there is still a punishment to come for him because I don't believe that justice has been served in that sense yet. So yeah, I'm glad that he won't be our problem if and when that does come around.
Yeah, I mean, and just sort of listen to what you've been saying and sort of analyzing this trade a bit. It just feels like it feels more so that the Clippers were interested in getting him off the team rather than being interested in Marjon Beauchamp. And that's obviously nothing against Marjon Beauchamp, but I think it's just like thinking about where he's at in his career compared to the type of player Kevin Porter Jr. is. Obviously, all the controversy around him, this move just feels like the Clippers were done with that.
There was like one monetary thing I think where like I think KPJ had a player option for next season, whereas I think
Mm.
Beauchamp's on non-guaranteed money because the Bucks declined his rookie extension. So there's that one little monetary thing at play from next season. But like you said, I think it's more for other reasons than the money really.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I'm not confident that this was a move to get away from the controversy because it's not like there was any developments since he joined.
Yeah, true. Yeah,
They've kept him on the team. They made the decision to bring him in. I don't think they've turned around and think, oh, actually, like the PR around this is obviously not great. I don't think they've had any second thoughts. I think it is mostly basketball reasons, but I think for the fans' perspective and everyone covering the team, pretty thankful to see Kevin Porter Jr. leave the team, and I hope obviously the investigation continues. But I think that's obviously closed book on that. Thankfully, we don't have to talk about
yeah.
him again, unless obviously the Clippers make another stupid decision down the line.
I was gonna say like if it like it's quite nice to just be now in an era at least where like we don't have the Josh Primo and Kevin Porter Jr.
Yeah,
like again low risk medium reward for like just problematic personalities on our roster. Like I just hope we're done with that era for a little bit now. Please, Steve Ballmer and Lawrence
we'll
Frank.
see. Yeah, we'll see. I reckon if one of these players had a expiring deal, then they might have they might have gone for it. I think like that's the
Oh
route they're
God.
going down, rather than the sort of type of person they're bringing in. But yeah, let's hope they at least learn a lesson from it. I mean, remains to be seen. I think what I'm most interested in is what they do with Beauchamp going forward, because, like you said, that's a non-guaranteed deal. It's probably quite easy for them to get rid of. I think what I'd potentially be interested in then is, you know, can they convert Jordan Miller into a deal now that the roster's being sort of pulled together and we've obviously made these moves. Um, I'm interested to see, can he get that NBA contract that he's been after, because I've been quite impressed with his performances this season, probably more so than what Bucham has been doing. I think he's got far higher ceiling than he has, and I think it deserves a deal. Obviously, we'll finish up with the final move that the Clippers have made in the buyout market, but we'll be interested to see what they do with him. But I'm really hoping that it's potentially the route of him maybe moving off the team or giving more opportunity to Jordan Miller to step up, because obviously the Clippers have shaved a couple of roster spots off the team. So I hope it's more, they're pleased with what they've seen from Jordan Miller, and obviously that's a guy that they haven't really had to give up any assets for. It's a guy they drafted obviously a few seasons back, and I think absolutely deserves the opportunity. So I'm hoping there's more to come there. But obviously moving on to the final move, and this was, I think, something that has been building for the last week with the Clippers having one eye on the buyout market. It didn't really seem like the Clippers were going to make any big trades. Obviously, that Terance Mann trade did happen. Obviously, we had obviously the small move for obviously Kevin Porter Jr. to move off the team, but there was always an eye on the buyout market. I think it was always rumored that the Clippers were going to be looking there. And amongst the names of buyout candidates, Ben Simmons' name was thrown around a lot. And I think it's a player that's been linked with the Clippers a couple of times now that his career has obviously got to a position where he's not this all-star that he was like a few seasons back. There's been a lot of controversy around his career. He's been involved in obviously a couple of trades. I think one actually to call out is that it's 3 years ago to the date that he was actually involved in the trade for essentially James Harden.
Right.
So that's quite interesting that obviously they'll now be on the same team. But yeah, talk to me about Ben Simmons, because this is a player I've always been interested in, but I know it has this very Russell Westbrook feel, and obviously there are two very different points in their career when they've joined the Clippers. Ben Simmons still being, a player that's only really supposed to be coming into his prime. Obviously was a first round pick back in 2016, but since obviously those all-star seasons he has not really hit the heights, but feels very Russell Westbrook-esque, where we bring in a player who is there's some value there, but the scoring side, obviously, he leaves less to be desired compared to Russell Westbrook in terms of scoring the basketballs. He doesn't shoot the three at all. Yeah, tell me your thoughts on Ben Simmons joining the Clippers. He's clearing waivers today, so I'm sort of expecting there to be a formal announcement at some point. But keen to hear your thoughts on Simmons becoming a Clipper.
Yeah, again, it feels like the theme of this episode, really, but the financials make sense around it. Again, it's low risk, and I would argue medium reward. I'm not sort of viewing it as like Ben can break into like the starting five by any stretch of the imagination. Like I
Mm.
think the starting five is near enough locked now. I could see there being like a almost a horses for courses situation where the Clippers decide whether they pick between Chris Dunn and Derek Jones Jr. on any given night, at least who gets the starter minutes if they don't just necessarily get the starter role because of the point of attack defense that Chris Dunn does bring. But yeah, with Ben, it's an intriguing one because again, like I think the reason there is controversy is because of all the back injuries and things like that down the years, and people wondering whether he's actually prepared to make the sacrifices that NBA players should make to, put their bodies on the line to be on the floor every night. People have probably called him a bit soft and things like that in those moments. He's definitely shown mental weakness when he's on the court as well. There's that sort of infamous play, I believe it was for the Sixers, where he passed up a layup under the basket
Yeah.
for somebody who had like a way worse and lower percentage shot. I think they were driving in, so ended up having to take like a pull up two basically because of the pass he made. I can't remember the exact play or the the details of it, but I remember it being everywhere at the time. And I think if you looked on my Twitter, I probably made some sort of comment on it at the time as well because
Yeah.
it was the sort of hallmarks of a player who probably just didn't feel ready for the moment. But I put a tweet out about this the other day, and I think you liked it from the Clippers UK page, didn't you? That
Mhm.
like everyone who and I've not seen anybody doing this. I think I've made my echo chamber quite tight in terms of basketball fandom to being mostly Clipper fans. I occasionally dabble into the NBA memes sphere a little bit, but beyond that, like I've not seen many people commenting on Ben Simmons to the Clippers. But if anybody is having those sort of, oh, it's not worked for anybody else in the same way they did with James Harden to the Clippers, so why is it going to work for the Clippers? Well, the thing I'd argue is like we didn't need James Harden to do the things that Brooklyn or Philadelphia need him to do, and similarly, we don't need Ben Simmons to do really any of the things. And I don't know if the expectation was that high in Brooklyn, but um, Brooklyn have been a bad team, and Ben Simmons is,
Yeah.
like you say, a previous rookie of the year, someone who comes in with, you know, just high caliber really in a team like the Brooklyn Nets. Whereas now he's a smaller fish in a slightly bigger pond in terms of the LA Clippers because that top end talent is, way bigger and better than what Ben Simmons has brought to an NBA court for the last few seasons. So Law Murray's already come out and basically asserted that, Ben is going to be the small ball five, in the spirit of that, the Clippers almost retooling around the bench and the starting five or, arguably six with or six or seven, I should say, with Chris Dunn and Amir Coffey kind of locked in their positions, at least on the bench for now. Bogdan Bogdanovic comes in and is the de facto Kevin Porter Jr. replacement. Um, it feels like Ben Simmons can be the de facto Nico Batum replacement in the way that Drew Eubanks is the de facto Mo Bamba replacement, sort of further down the rotation. So intrigued to see how the Ben experiment goes. Whether the Clippers can do the thing they've done a couple of times now with players like Nico Batum, with players like Reggie Jackson and stuff, and sort of, rehab another career and make this, complete this sort of circle of low risk, medium reward and get a tune out of Ben Simmons. Again, like we don't have lofty ambitions for the Clippers, really. I think both of us would bite hands off now for second round of the playoffs. But I think some people probably bite your hand off for staying out of the play-in for now and being one of the top
Mm.
six seed teams before you even think about what the Clippers can do in the playoffs. So yeah, intrigued to see how it works with Ben, intrigued to see Ty Lue in particular, as one of the best X's and O coaches in the NBA, sort of get his hands on Ben Simmons and see what we can do around that and sort of clean up some of the margins where maybe Ben has let himself down in recent years in the NBA. And yeah, if it is small ball five, he's 6'11", he's got, I think, serious playmaking chops as well as some level of athleticism in terms of his inside game. Again, that depends on how much his body holds up really, but we don't need him to be stretch. We don't need him to be doing any of that sort of anything on that side of the ball offensively when it comes to deeper shooting because we've hopefully got guys in Amir and even Nico in whatever minutes he'll now play and hopefully Bogdan Bogdanovic who can stretch the floor a little bit more and we'll start to see some different looks in staggers between the starting lineup and the bench now. So yeah, just intrigued to see how that all shakes out.
Yeah, I think he's got some really interesting attribute. He's quite unique in that there's not really another player in the league like Ben Simmons, this sort
No.
of tall, stereotypical point guard, but he can't really shoot the ball, but he's so athletic, and I think is still defends at a really, really high level. You know, this is a guy who made some defensive teams back in the day, and was a previous All-Star. I think, like you mentioned, since the Sixers, he's not. I think he had that 1 or 2 seasons where he was with the Nets with KD and Kyrie, but obviously even with James Harden, that wasn't a good environment. Let alone Ben Simmons, obviously coming off like a really sort of horrible few seasons in Philadelphia, where he was sort of made out to be the villain. I don't think he stepped into a culture where it was like, okay, now I can reset and go again. It felt like that Nets culture was also dying as well. And then it's become, you know, no offense to the Brooklyn Nets, but they're not competing for anything, not really got any big names on that team. I think, and I obviously um, hearing how the players have been speaking about this Clipper team in the locker room, like it seems like a really good group. It's got some really good veterans, and I think it's probably going to be the best environment that he's played in. He's probably going to be the most comfortable being in Los Angeles, playing in Intuit Dome. I think this is a good environment for him to almost have that reset now that he's, you know, in the sort of part of his career where it's sort of do or die for him. He's 28 now. Like I said, he's reached his peak, but if he wants to continue to play in the NBA, he needs to start performing. So it's really more on him than it is for the Clippers. The Clippers don't particularly need Ben Simmons, like you said, to become this outrageous player. There's no real demands on him. I think it's on him to figure this out from now on out. And I think he's in a great environment, like you said, being able to work with Ty Lue. That's going to be really, really interesting. I think my main concern is with that around this reporting that he's going to be seen as like a backup five. Interesting to see how that plays out. I think there's probably more use for him as sort of the primary ball handler, maybe even like a backup point guard, with his playmaking ability and his sort of point of attack defending. I don't think that's a guy you can really rely on being a rim defender. I mean, I don't even want to look at the stats. I know he's played some minutes as a five for the Nets, but I think that's going to be it's going to be easy buckets for whoever's playing against Ben Simmons if he's playing at the five. But there are some interesting scenarios I think you could put it in just due to his size, his athleticism, his ability to defend all positions. It's just that sort of like rim protection and obviously ability to space the floor. It might be a bit of an issue, and I think obviously we saw sort of similar things with Russell Westbrook where the spacing was a bit strange because teams would just sit off him because they knew that he wouldn't shoot, and it just made his life a bit harder. But I think there will be some really cool plays I think Tyler's going to manage to draw up with Ben Simmons. I can already see like a really like nice pick and roll with James Harden. Like I think James is really going to relish that because obviously they were, like I mentioned, they were part of the same trade. They didn't get to play with each other at Brooklyn. I think James is really going to like take to playing with Ben Simmons, and I hope that he's coming with this attitude to get started. And maybe that's just me being ignorant. I haven't really followed Ben Simmons too closely, but obviously there's been this sort of feeling around him that he's not obviously like obsessed with basketball, or he's not really got that work ethic. But I yeah, remains to be seen. Like I said, it's low risk, high reward, and I think it's just a really cool fit. And I always loved players who can just do really flashy passes, and I'm just waiting for that first one that he will just chuck to the corner, and hopefully hopefully he's a good fit. And like I said, he's got Patty Mills there, his obviously fellow teammate for Australia, so that's obviously going to be one foot in the door. And like I said, I think this group is sort of going to be a perfect environment for him to just find his role within the team. And really, really excited to see him play. And like I mentioned, he clears waivers today, so he should be announced as a Clipper fairly soon. Just hoping those back issues, we've seen the back of them, but like you mentioned, I don't think the Clippers should expect a whole lot from Ben Simmons if he is going to be spending some time into this season. But I think he's played a fair amount of games this season already. He's not put up insane numbers, but we'll see. Really interesting move for the Clippers, and let's see how it works. I think the Clippers could have a really, really strong defensive lineup with guys like Ben Simmons, Chris Dunn, Derek Jones Jr., Kawhi Leonard, Ivica Zubac. Like that's almost sort of a team that would suffocate anyone in the league if they're all playing to their potential. So yeah, let's see. Yeah, any closing thoughts on Ben Simmons?
No, no, not a ton on Ben really that we've not already covered. Yeah, just excited to see how that shakes out. As we mentioned at the top of the show a little bit, the Clippers are in a weird spot at
Mhm.
the moment, so it feels like it feels like again that retooling around the bench is maybe what needed to happen. Kawhi obviously comes out after the loss to the Lakers and sort of blames the second unit, almost throws the second unit under the bus a little bit, which I was kind of frustrated with just because the Clippers
Yeah.
had conceded 45 points in the first quarter, which the starters were in for the majority of. So that was a little bit frustrating to hear. But I mean, Kawhi's got his wish now. That as I say, they have sort of retooled around that second unit. So let's see if it works. And Kawhi will have to put his money where his mouth is now.
Yeah, and I think that's potentially, and we're probably done on talking trades and off season, but that's probably something I don't think we've touched on since we last spoke. Obviously, Kawhi has now played 14 games. I don't think he's really back to that full potential, but I think I was also a little bit confused by what he said the other day. I don't know if I was missing some context from what he said about the second unit, but I don't think that obviously he's like anywhere near the player that we saw sort of around this time last year for the Clippers. So I think that's absolutely understandable. Only 14 games in, he's obviously had that big injury, the big surgery that he's gone through, but him himself, obviously, he needs to sort of get back to it. But I don't think he's particularly wrong, obviously, about the second year. The club has obviously seen it and they need to address it. But
Yeah.
he's obviously got a fair bit to go. Luckily, obviously, we're only in February and there's still some time for him to get back to it. But how have you felt about Kawhi Leonard returning to the team and his performances over the last month or so?
Kind of as I expected, really. Like I think I mentioned this maybe if not on the last episode, then possibly the episode before when the the rumors were gathering of Kawhi coming back. I think he probably got back into the braids by then, so we were all feeling like he was ramping up towards a return. And I just sort of preached patience really among Clipper Nation that it might work in dispatches at first, but there's going to be times as well where it doesn't. And I think you've seen that a little bit more in recent weeks. As the minutes have ramped up, you've maybe seen Kawhi's fatigue just gather a little bit as well. I'm pleased that over the All-Star break, he'll be able to actually have a break, which is, a rare thing for him because he's usually a part of those sort of events over that weekend. So, um, I would have possibly prayed for the same for James Harden, but he seems to really be pleased with the individual accolade of getting to the All-Star game again. So I can't, take that away from James. And then Norman Powell, I think, is probably not a guy that we need to worry too much about in terms of his, level of fatigue and energy, because I think he's brought that all season. And again, you saw that against the Jazz the other night when probably Kawhi and Harden flattered to deceive again just a little bit in the same way they did in the Lakers game. So yeah, I'll continue to expect more from Kawhi, but we'll sort of keep my powder a little bit dry because the hope is, because this is effectively is preseason, that when we see peak Kawhi is during playoff time. And until then, no great expectations, just hopes that he'll put it all together. Hopes that we will be, worthy of playoff qualification either through the play-in and being able to win out in the play-in or by qualifying for the sixth seed, as I say, would be the optimal thing for the Clippers. But no expectations around any of that. Just want to see Kawhi get back to full health, back to full fitness, and hopefully that will help improve the vibes around the Clippers because they are a little bit iffy now. Possibly again, like maybe we're missing some key context, but not necessarily helped by what he said in that sort of locker room interview around the second unit. But a lot of the guys who would have been laying the gauntlet down for in the second unit are no longer with the Clippers. So hopefully that fresh blood does bring some fresh ideas to the floor. Hopefully, the All-Star weekend break, I guess week-long break that the players get either side of that as well, does the Clippers some good and refreshes the vibes going into the second half of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, the vibes have been a little low right now, but we've only got I think 2 games until the All-Star break.
Yeah.
So let's see if we can at least pick up one win out of the two. Just get to the All-Star break. Obviously, we've got a fairly obviously we've still got the core of the group still the same, but around the outside there are some new players there. Obviously, Kawhi is not obviously going to be participating in All-Star weekend, thank God. So he's going to have a little bit of time to just reset. Obviously, he's been playing a few games recently, and to get back to it. And then obviously those guys who've just joined the team, obviously Ben Simmons, Marjon Beauchamp, and Bogey as well. Like these are guys that obviously need to sort of learn sort of Tyler's methods, and hopefully being around the team over that time, and obviously having a bit of time off to reset would do everyone some good, and they can come back and almost hopefully have like the opposite sort of post All-Star run that they had last year. Because I think
Yeah.
if you remember, we came into that All-Star break playing pretty well, and I think post All-Star break we sort of fell off leading into the playoffs, and I think momentum is everything in sports. I think definitely in the NBA as well. So if they can really pull a run together from February to April, they can set themselves up for playoff success. And I think they've got the right pieces. They just need to put it together now, and hopefully that time of the All-Star break where maybe we're only really going to see James and Norm obviously participating in that. They can have that reset. Because like you mentioned, there's been a little bit of a lull over the last few games, obviously dropping quite a bad loss to the Pacers where they had a 20 plus point lead, and obviously that lost to the Lakers, which we won't spend too much time talking about, but obviously was one of the worst losses
Yeah.
in that sort of fixture of all time. So we can put that behind us. We've got the Grizzlies on Thursday this week, and Jazz. I'll be interested to see if any of the new guys play those games. If potentially they hold Ben Simmons out until after the All-Star break to give him some time to get settled. But yeah, we'll see. Any closing thoughts for you before we wrap things up?
No, all good on the closing thoughts front. Yeah, excited to see how these trades lie, how these acquisitions for the Clippers, sort of shake out over the coming weeks and months, and excited to see a Norman Powell dub in the 3-point contest as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I don't know how his position lies for getting an All-Star appearance on reserves now. Obviously, like guys like Anthony Davis have pulled out.
Yeah,
I don't think I've seen any news on it, but I'm not expecting it. But I'm hopeful that we might see something for him, because he absolutely yeah, he deserves it.
yeah.
And yeah, it'll be interesting to see his 3-point performance. I'm not sure, did he perform in it last year? I can't remember. But I believe he
Don't
was in it a
think
few seasons
so.
ago.
Yeah,
Or has he had a performance in it? I don't know.
yeah.
But well, yeah, hopefully he brings a dub home for Clipper Nation in an All Star weekend. But yeah, I think that's all from today. Obviously, we've had a lot to talk about in terms of Clippers changes. Very excited to see how things look post All Star break. We'll probably jump back on sometime after All Star break. Maybe we'll give it some time for the new guys to settle in, and we can have a reflection on their start to life with the Clippers. Obviously, particularly with obviously Ben Simmons and Bogey, focus on them in particular, and obviously how Kawhi Leonard's improving, and hopefully we're on a less of a bad run, and there's more good feeling around Clipper Nation now that the front office has obviously made these big changes. But yeah, no, thanks for listening and watching today, and thanks again, Josh, for your time. Remind everyone where they can find you and your work.
Yeah, so at Sexton 24, wherever you get your social media, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, I think that covers all the bases. Blue Sky, if anyone is still doing that, low key. Sadly, that has not taken off in the way that we hoped, but yeah, fingers crossed. There's more exciting things to come from the Clippers, and I'll be always across all the latest gossip, rumors, memes, whatever on those pages. So check them out.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, thanks all again. Go Clips, go.